always thought turning 38 wasn't that big of a milestone, but maybe for my husband, Ethan, and my best friend Lauren, this was the perfect moment to drop the curtain on a show they'd been performing for an entire year. The birthday party was held at Maison Fleur, a French restaurant in downtown Portland. Soft golden lights, violin music drifting from the corner of the room, and one familiar face after another wishing me well. All arranged by Lauren as a big surprise. She smiled brightly when I walked in, hugged me like she was still the same best friend who once held me while I cried the night my mother died. Ethan stood beside her, handsome as ever, wearing the suit I picked out for him last Christmas. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "Tonight is all yours." I thought maybe he was gearing up for another emotional speech like he did every year. Something like, "Maya is the light of my life," or, "I can't imagine this world without you." I was used to those words. But tonight, his voice had a completely different tone. He raised his glass from the center of the room, his smile sweeping across the crowd. "Before we all raise a glass to celebrate Maya," he said, "there's something I want to share." I held my crystal glass, smiling, waiting, until I saw where his eyes went. Not toward me, toward Lauren. She stepped forward, the lights catching the green silk dress I had suggested she wear just weeks ago. Her eyes didn't avoid mine. In fact, they held a cold sense of triumph. Ethan took a breath and said clearly, "Maya, you've been an important part of my life, but sometimes love shows up in the most unexpected places." My chest tightened, the murmurs started, then Lauren spoke, softly, like she was telling a sweet little story over afternoon tea. "We didn't want things to happen this way, but we're in love, and we want to live honestly with our feelings." There was no clinking of glasses. The room sank into a kind of silence I had never felt before, one that choked the air out of me. Lauren looked at me, waiting for a reaction. Maybe she expected me to scream or burst into tears, but I simply touched the sapphire bracelet Ethan had given me on our 5th anniversary, then slowly unfastened it. I placed it on the table, right beside the chocolate mousse cake Lauren said would make Maya cry from joy. I met Ethan's gaze without flinching. "You picked my favorite restaurant, my birthday, and the woman I once called a sister to stage this little show? I'll give you this, you've still got style." Lauren opened her mouth, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You wore the dress I suggested, chose the place I love, and invited the people I trusted most to witness your betrayal. I hope it lived up to everything you pictured in your head." Then I turned to Ethan, my voice colder than a January night. "And you? I don't need another word from a man who chooses this way to leave a marriage." I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavy as lead, but I held my head high. Just as I touched the glass door, a young server approached timidly. "I'm sorry, Miss Maya. I probably shouldn't say this, but they came here together a lot over the past year. Always said it was for a private work meeting." I offered a small smile, not of surprise but of quiet recognition. "Thank you," I said, my voice low and firm. "You're not the first to choose the right side." I pushed the door open and stepped out. Nighttime in Portland was cold and blurry, but I knew one thing for sure. Their show had ended, and mine had just begun. After that birthday night, I vanished. Not in a dramatic finding myself in the mountains kind of way. To the people who thought they knew me, I had vanished completely. I filed for a 3-week leave at Martin & Roches, the law firm, citing personal time off, and moved out of the house filled with too many memories. I rented a small apartment in the Alberta Arts District, using my mother's maiden name, Maya Callahan, to make sure no one could track me down. I cut every connection, social media, the friend group, even the yoga class I went to every Friday. The old phone stayed powered off, flooded with messages full of concern, confusion, pity. I left every message unanswered. Comfort wouldn't help me. Clarity and precision would. Inside my 500-square-foot apartment, I built myself a trench. A desk by the window, my encrypted personal computer running the same software I once used for high-profile clients, and a whiteboard filled with red marker notes, my way of stitching together every piece of the deception they had orchestrated. By day I showed up at work on time. No complaints, no slips, no signs of emotion. Everyone knew about the party, but my silence scared them more than any outburst ever could. Co-workers avoided my gaze. They didn't know what to say to a woman betrayed by her husband and best friend, in front of dozens of witnesses. At night, I dug deeper. Ethan's laptop, the MacBook I helped him upgrade, still had files syncing to iCloud. He used to say, "You've always been better with tech than me." Ironic. I searched through Ethan's work email, hidden folders, conversations between him and Lauren they thought were deleted. Some of it was encrypted but protected by a password that was, of all things, my birthday. One message made my heart stop. Lauren. Has she started suspecting anything yet? Ethan. Maya has no idea. She always trusts people. Don't worry, she's not the type to seek revenge. I read it again and again, as if it were the mission statement for the plan I was about to launch. A wildly inaccurate assumption. I downloaded Ethan's entire financial history, his recent investments, property deals that didn't have my name on them, hidden accounts never mentioned in our marriage. Then I moved on to Lauren, her Instagram private to close friends only. Offered more than I expected. Photos of new real estate listings, champagne glasses, and captions hinting at the life she finally deserved. I even found a photo of a signed share transfer agreement for a small company Ethan once invested in. The recipient's name? Callahan Estates, LLC. Callahan. My mother's last name. They used my name to legitimize a transfer of assets before the divorce was even official? A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was a calculated plan, one that used fake love to legalize theft. I began archiving everything to an encrypted hard drive. An old college friend, now working at the Oregon State Auditor's office, would be my next stop. But before that, I needed one more person. Quincy Moss, the investigative journalist who exposed a major financial scandal in the city government 3 years ago. I still had the thank you email he sent me when I helped connect him to a key witness in that case. I sent a single line. I have a story bigger than the 2021 rail fund scandal. Meet me. No bylines. The moment the message was sent, I looked out the window. The city buzzed on, the lights still glittering, while I, the woman left behind under the pitiful gaze of a crowd, was redrawing the map for a war none of them ever thought I could fight. Ethan once told me, "You're too kind to understand how this game works." Maybe he was right, but once kind people stop being naive, they have nothing left to lose. I knew this. People like Ethan and Lauren don't fall from a single blow. They thrive in the gray areas of morality, where anything can be bent with the right words at the right time to the right people. So I didn't go public. I didn't make noise. I started with the small things. Under the identity of a real estate investor researching the Portland market, I created 2 anonymous email accounts, each with its own persona. One was Marissa Cole, an investor from Seattle. The other was Helen Kim, a representative for a private credit fund. I used Helen to reach out to clients who had previously worked with Lauren, now the CEO of a brokerage firm called L&K Collective. Meanwhile, Marissa contacted former partners of Ethan, who had recently rebranded himself as a consultant for restructuring businesses. A PR stunt, dressed in designer suits and polished phrases. Every call, every email was written in professional, precise language, targeting the right concerns. I've heard there might be some discrepancies in their asset disclosures. Is that true? Or did you ever receive an addendum contract? A few clients mentioned their information didn't match the official paperwork. I never pushed, I only suggested. And let suspicion take root, and doubt, when planted enough, becomes the seed of something far more dangerous: mistrust. At the same time, I began selectively submitting documents to the appropriate channels. Undisclosed investment activity from Ethan's fund? Sent to the Oregon State Securities Commission. Suspicious brokerage contracts, inflated asset valuations, and lists of fake clients Lauren used to boost company stats? Forwarded to the Federal Tax Inspection Division. Photographic evidence of Lauren negotiating intimately with a developer in unfinished project sites? Privately sent to CivicLine, the online news outlet known for digging into ethical scandals in the Pacific Northwest business world. I left no trail. All materials were submitted through VPNs, using encrypted anonymous email services. Each file bore a tiny symbol in the corner, a silver phoenix. No one but me knew what it meant, because I was the one who designed it. On the night I took off my sapphire bracelet at that birthday dinner, knowing the old Maya no longer existed. I wasn't the only one waiting for the right moment to speak the truth. One Wednesday afternoon I received an email from Miles Harrington, the journalist Ethan once threatened to sue for writing about a public land deal conflict in 2018. Back then, Ethan had represented the developers and used contract clauses to get Miles's article taken down. Miles wrote, "I don't know who you are, but I verified the first 3 files. Everything checks out. If you have more, I'll pursue this to the end. I owe myself that much." I sent 2 more files. One of them contained an audio recording of Ethan speaking with a local broker, bluntly suggesting they cut material quality during the initial phase to save money customers won't notice. He even laughed. Miles' first article went live Monday morning. Short, sharp headline: "Behind the Glass, Ethan Brooks and the Shell Company Web." It didn't accuse him outright, but the questions raised were enough to send waves through the city's financial and real estate circles. I watched quietly from the cafe downstairs, laptop in front of me like a window into a far bigger chessboard. I posted nothing online. I gave away no emotional cues during work calls. I was still Maya Callahan, the composed, punctual attorney who never brought personal drama into the office. Only I knew the truth, that deep inside a plan had already taken root. I didn't destroy them in one night. I let them walk, step by step, into the trap they built with their own hands, sinking deeper with every move. By week 8 after my birthday, the storm finally hit. Monday morning's local financial report read, "Oregon Securities Commission opens preliminary investigation into Brooks and Pine investment firm." Ethan's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who stood behind the name Pine. By Wednesday, the federal tax agency issued a surprise audit notice for 3 subsidiaries within the real estate investment chain Lauren managed. The reason? Irregularities in asset valuation and transaction volume. I sat at my desk as headlines spread like wildfire across my screen. A candid photo of Ethan, captured as he stepped out of his SUV at corporate headquarters, appeared with the caption, "Is the Brooks empire crumbling?" No one at the firm knew I had anything to do with it, but they looked at me more cautiously than usual, because even though I said nothing, my silence now carried more weight than any official press release. By the end of that week, one of the hardest blows landed on Lauren. 2 of her former clients, a jewelry store owner and a private investor, filed lawsuits against L&K Collective simultaneously. Both accused Lauren's brokerage of knowingly mispricing assets, hiding legal issues tied to land deeds, and leading them into losses totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it didn't stop there. The Preston Foundation, a highly respected charity in the Pacific Northwest, officially announced the termination of all funding for the community projects Lauren had spearheaded. The reason? Only 23% of funds had actually reached the intended recipients. The rest was unaccounted for. A spokesperson for the foundation said in an interview, "We deeply regret putting our faith in the values Lauren McKay claimed to stand for. That trust has now been broken." Lauren used to take immense pride in her Empower Portland initiative. She styled herself as a compassionate female leader, appearing on local television programs to speak about empathy in business. Now, no network would touch her. A former legal contact of Ethan's, Mark Tiller, texted me after reading the second investigative piece by journalist Miles. "I don't know what you're doing, Maya, but looks like Ethan's about to get kicked from the law firm. The board's in emergency session." A few days later it became official. Ethan Brooks suspended from Grant and Doyle law firm pending internal investigation. That line was brief, but I knew it would hit Ethan like a sucker punch. In 12 years of work, he had never given anyone a reason to question him. Now everyone was questioning everything. I printed the article and pinned it to the whiteboard across from my desk. A red thumbtack went right through Ethan's name. And Lauren? I saw a small LinkedIn update saying she was pausing operations to realign the company's strategic direction. But I knew that was just a polished way of saying collapse. A potential client, someone I'd previously contacted under the name Helen Kim, sent a private message. "Ms. Mackay has not responded to our requests for financial transparency. We've decided to withdraw all cooperation. Either way, thank you for the heads up. They thought I was a savior, but all I saw was justice beginning to move. Lauren once said in a podcast on women in leadership, "People can forgive failure, but they won't forget deceit." I saved that quote, not to remind her, but to prepare for the next wave. On Saturday, Portland was soaked in rain, as if the city itself was washing away the polished illusions Ethan and Lauren had once built. But there was one thing rain couldn't cleanse: a video of the two of them arguing in the middle of Pioneer Courthouse Square. It was filmed from 3 separate angles by 3 total strangers. Within 4 hours, it had made the rounds, from our old friend circle to legal and real estate forums, and eventually the media. Ethan, hair disheveled and shirt-drenched, shouted, "You said you had a plan, Lauren. You told me to trust you. Now look, everything's gone." Lauren, face pale and high heels splattered with mud, jabbed a finger at his chest. "It's all because you're weak. If you hadn't been so scared, we could have survived this." The same people who once praised them as a successful, glamorous power couple were now hitting replay, not out of sympathy but for sheer entertainment. The video, titled "When Power Collapses, Portland's Power Couple Falls from Grace," was even used in a marketing seminar as a prime example of self-inflicted brand destruction. Then came the cascade. Lauren's company accounts were frozen by the bank under request from the tax bureau. Brokerage contracts were terminated en masse. Ethan was summoned by the Bar Ethics Committee, and his asset declarations landed in the hands of an independent audit firm. Ironically, one of their senior advisors was an old classmate of mine from Yale. The message I received from her contained only 3 words: "She's the worst." 1 week later, Ethan's silver Porsche was towed in broad daylight. 3 days after that, the penthouse they once shared in the Pearl District was listed for sale at 20% below market value. They had no other options left. I didn't need to lift a finger. When the financial, legal, and media systems turn their backs, Ethan and Lauren are nothing more than 2 pawns turning on each other in a game that's already been flipped over. The final act that marked the end of their so-called love transcends circumstances illusion happened on a Thursday night at the Women Rising Foundation fundraising gala. Lauren still showed up, trying to look composed in an old sequin dress, reportedly borrowed. Her face was heavily made up, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. A few people greeted her politely but quickly moved on. Lauren's mother, Nancy McKay, was the evening's guest of honor. When she stepped onto the stage to speak, she paused right in front of the microphone, eyes locking on her daughter seated in the second row. She spoke, voice weary. "As a mother, I used to be proud of my daughter, thought she was strong, smart, and kind-hearted. But today, I owe you all an apology, because I failed to teach my child the difference between true reputation and the trust others place in you." Lauren froze. I watched from afar, no need to get closer, because the event's live broadcast caught every detail: lips pressed tight, eyes glistening, both hands clenched into her dress. That night, Lauren didn't stay for the dinner. She left before the program ended, no goodbyes, no pleasantries. The next day, I receive an anonymous message, just a link to a private forum focused on public figures in law and finance. The latest thread: Maya Callahan, the quiet woman who was never weak. I watched from a distance as their final facade collapsed. Their love just a glitter-dusted mask. And when the storm came, what showed beneath was cracks, calculation, and the fear of facing themselves. I was reading an internal SEC bulletin when the doorbell rang at 10:17 p.m. The security camera lit up with the face I hadn't seen in person in over half a year. Ethan. Unshaven, hollow-cheeked, eyes shadowed, clutching a crumpled coat. He lingered at the door, then knocked again, so softly it barely made a sound, like he was afraid I might disappear if he made too much noise. I let him wait exactly 3 minutes, 1 minute for each year he and Lauren had betrayed me in secret. Then I pressed the button to unlock the door. Ethan stepped into the penthouse, now fully under my name, the same one we chose together when I turned 30. But everything inside had changed. New sofa, walls repainted in cold ash gray, abstract prints replacing our old wedding photos. Ethan looked lost, like an uninvited guest. The place looks really different. My head tilted more out of curiosity than compassion. I didn't speak. Instead, I poured a glass of cold water and placed it in front of him. "What do you want?" His voice came out hoarse as he met my eyes. "Maya, I know. I ruined everything. But you're the only person I have left now. You always listened, always stayed calm. You're the only one—" I cut him off, my gaze steady. The only one still standing after being betrayed by her husband and best friend in front of 30 people? He lowered his head. The man standing in front of me no longer resembled the one who once raised a glass at my birthday party and declared he'd found true love. I didn't come to defend myself. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I sat down, legs crossed, spine straight. My hand rested lightly on the smart speaker remote beside the chair. Already synced to a private recording mode. Ethan was under criminal investigation for violating investor protection laws. Anything he said tonight could be key. "That's interesting, Ethan. You're sorry. For what? For lying to me or for thinking I was too weak to fight back?" He clenched his hands, trembling slightly. I didn't think you'd go this far." "Exactly. That's why you're standing here empty-handed, while I'm sitting in the apartment you once called undivided marital property." Ethan looked around, eyes red. He exhaled, then whispered, "Lauren left Portland. She sold off what was left to pay personal debts. Her mother cut her off, and I have nothing. The firm won't take me back. My old clients won't return my calls. I came here because you're the only one who ever believed in who I really was." Time stretched between us as I met his eyes and said nothing. The truth was, Ethan had once been a good man. Or at least he had known how to make others believe he was. But what I'd gained through this entire journey wasn't hatred. It was something far sharper. Clarity. "You're wrong, Ethan," I said quietly. "I believed in the version of you that you created. But after everything, I don't need to believe in anyone anymore." Ethan began to cry. Without an audience, his performance fell flat. I pushed back my chair and walked to the door. Slow, deliberate. "I think you should leave, and if I were you, I'd choose every word carefully from now on. Portland's smaller than you think." As he walked toward the door, his shoulders slumped under the weight he had never learned how to carry. The burden of his own failure. I locked the door. The click echoed like a final punctuation mark. I thought that once Ethan crumbled, Lauren vanished, and their manufactured empire turned to dust. I'd feel lighter. But the truth is, silence after victory isn't peace. Every morning, I still sat in my penthouse, looking through the tall glass windows, watching the city pulse like no storm had ever passed through. I sipped coffee from a carefully chosen mug, read financial news, checked the list of people who had turned their backs on me, and quietly crossed out each name. I thought that was freedom, but it wasn't. It was a deliberate kind of isolation. Until one day, David Murphy, the founder of a small business investment fund in Oregon, reached out to me. He used to be my colleague at Grant & Doyle and was one of the few who had quietly emailed encouragement after that birthday party. No names, no digging, just coffee, and a folder that changed everything. "We're restructuring our legal support program for small businesses, but we're not looking for traditional lawyers. We need someone like you. Someone who sees the weak spots, but this time to reinforce them, not tear them down." I read every page carefully, and the more I read, the more it felt like someone was pulling my hand from the edge of the abyss. I said yes. There was no announcement, no LinkedIn post. I simply walked into the new office on the 9th floor of an old building in East Burnside, sat down, and got to work, quietly cleaning up someone else's mess. My first project was a candle and essential oils shop, owned by a single mom named Claire Jennings. Sales had plummeted after the pandemic, and she was on the verge of bankruptcy due to a lease agreement with highly unfavorable terms. I met her at the shop, a small space scented with lavender and sweet orange, but Claire's eyes looked tired, like she was preparing to pack up her dream in cardboard boxes. I sat down, opened my laptop, studied the lease, cross-referenced her transaction history and cash flow. And then I saw the name on the lease. Lauren McKay. I stilled but let the silence speak instead. Claire noticed my expression shift and asked softly, "You know Lauren? I used to work at her firm, got fired after reporting a colleague who faked client records. I looked up at her. In that moment, Claire wasn't just a client. She was part of the same fight, another casualty of the same corrupt machine I had spent 6 months dismantling. I know, I said, and I think this time, we're not letting her take anyone else down. I rewrote Claire's legal documentation, renegotiated the lease, outlined a cash flow restructuring plan, and guided her through applications for 3 post-pandemic recovery grants. 4 weeks later, Claire stood in front of her shop, newly painted with a cozy coffee corner in the back, and said with tears in her eyes, "No one ever stood up for me. Until you. I owe you a whole new life." A quiet smile crossed my lips, not out of triumph, but because I was finally rebuilding. Not from the ashes of others, but from the fragments of myself I had learned to hold. The next morning, I sent David an email. "I'd like to take on more cases, and if there's any business being crushed under vague clauses, send it my way." He replied in 7 minutes. "Welcome to the rebuild phase. You're ready." I sold the penthouse the following spring, on the very day the magnolias bloomed across Oregon. The agent was surprised I accepted an offer below market value. Letting go mattered more than any extra gain. Peace had become the real value, and that was worth more than any number. My new apartment was a third of the size, on the 5th floor of a red brick building overlooking Laurelhurst Park. Gone were the sharp lines and empty echoes. Now, I had sunlight, linen, and laughter. Small things that felt like healing. I picked everything myself: cream-colored linen curtains, a tiny cactus on the windowsill, and a scratched oak writing desk where I finally began writing down the thoughts I had only carried in my mind. David introduced me to Alexander Brooks, a media studies professor who once assisted in content analysis for the investigative series I worked on last year. I remembered his name from email replies. "Professor Brooks says your timeline structuring resembles crisis communication models." The first time we met, he smiled and said, "I used to tell my students, when a woman chooses silence, be careful. But after reading your work, I changed it to, when a woman chooses action, no words are needed." Alexander never asked about my past, never mentioned Ethan, Lauren, or anyone connected to them. He only spoke of books, education, and the maple tree outside my window. How, if cared for properly, its leaves would turn fire red in fall. I don't know exactly when we became something. Just that one Saturday afternoon, he stood in my kitchen making me chamomile tea and said, "I don't think I'm here to heal you, Maya. I just want to be the person beside you when peace returns." And I said yes, not because I needed someone to fill a space, but because I wanted to learn how to live without guarding every inch of myself. On my 42nd birthday, I didn't throw a party. Forget the flowers and sweet words. All I longed for was stillness, a window view, quiet jazz, and a glass of wine that didn't ask for anything back. Alexander sat beside me, reading the final chapter of the novel he always said was too beautiful to rush. I was folding a napkin when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was. "Lauren, you won, but I hope you learned your lesson too." I read it again and again, and only felt pity for a woman who still believed every game only had 2 outcomes: win or lose. I replied with one line. "I learned what you never understood. Self-respect isn't something you can borrow." Then I turned off my phone. That summer, I agreed to mentor a program for female-led startups in Portland. Not to teach them revenge, but to teach them how to protect themselves, with knowledge, clear contracts, preparation, and the right kind of trust. One of the women I mentored was Naomi, 26, who had lost her entire investment because she didn't read the exclusivity clause. One afternoon, she asked me, "Have you ever been betrayed? Like so deeply you stopped trusting anyone?" I smiled, not out of certainty, but reflection. Words could wait. Then I told her the story of a woman who once stood up in a black dress at a birthday party, unclasped a sapphire bracelet, and walked away from a life that thought it couldn't exist without her. Naomi sat quietly for a while and then whispered, "I think I understand." And I believed she did. Because the deepest lessons aren't always in what we say, they're in how we live. After everything breaks. Maya's story isn't just about reclaiming justice after brutal betrayal, it's proof that clarity and quiet strength can reshape an entire life. In the real world, no one escapes hurt or failure. But what we choose next, whether to collapse or rebuild, is what defines our true worth. Maya chose not to stop at revenge. She used the very strength others underestimated to write a new chapter, calm, grounded, and free from the chains of her past. What do you think of Maya's journey? Did she go too far, or was it exactly what she needed to reclaim herself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.